Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you right here. I'm talking about right here with tuition money vote right here, and talk about right here whenever it comes to understanding about figuring out that the math and then doing the counting and all that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way that doesn't really go by the voice about somebody speaking up about okay, how much they're willing to agree on their behalf. And a lot of times you want to know too that really does it really start out with the tuition, or does it really start out with the fact about about your insurance, or maybe about allowance paid to you within a certain period of time of the year. And like everybody else would say too, that based on their taxes, and especially that if you're putting certain amounts on a charge card or something like that. Let's just say if it's about a credit card or something like that. But a lot of times you want to know too that if we were actually be doing the math configuration right here, and let's just say that on average though that it's about maybe every 5 years or so that you're going to be doing the calculations, and you might see a little bit less at certain periods of times of the year, and you might see a little bit more, but a lot of times it sure seems that way that in case of any kids that might even ask too, is that talk about with their parents or maybe any other friends and family members that what exactly is a tuition. And you want to tell everybody that what is a tuition. Well, tuition pretty much means that it's a pay up. I'm like, oh yeah, basically it's basically, I'll go ahead and right on here that make this a little bit smaller right here. But you have right here I talk about for tuition cost, and that your tuitions are basically that they are paid amounts in which that the person agrees to pay. So let's just say that on average though that if we're talking about paid for paid in full or a partial payment. So a lot of times, well, what does that usually mean? Whenever I say that, well, it's like a payment plan arrangement. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we speak about tuition costs, though, and you're likely thinking that okay, tuition cost that there's going to be requirements based on those tuition payments, right? But a lot of times you want to know too that it goes by the does that really go by the option to where you can go ahead and choose what plan that you want to go by, or do you have to go by a certain number? And so like everybody else might even say that if we're talking about maybe the 888 and maybe the 77, and you want to know too that well really if you were actually doing the calculations, that do you really have control over that? And if you had control over that, then maybe would there be a certain period of the time of the year to where you can go ahead and make that selection? So let's just say that on average though that you did not say that you were going to agree to pay 1,877 in full, for the tuition cost. And I guess this reading right here, I guess would read 1,000,000 $888,888 or something like that. But let's just say on average though that when we're speaking about tuition cost, that a lot of students that may even say too that well really that what you are basically are saying is that based on your education, right? That when we think about that though, that you think that maybe you could be paying up to maybe 3 times more than what you originally started out with. And like a lot of the students might even ask that question too, is toward about how much on average do you think that you will be paying within 10 years, including the scholarships and grants, including any internships, and along with, any other sorts of awards or anything like that. And you want to know too that from whenever you do start, that it's possible that why you maybe want to ask the question toward it. Why do you think that you would be working out where you go ahead and take out a loan whenever maybe that at some point later on, if you do earn any grants or any source of credit hours or something like that. But for the most part, though, that when we talk about tuition costs, though, that is that really a voice? And it sure seems that way. A lot of students would maybe ask that question to where if that's really supposed to be your voice being placed on the fact about that you go ahead and send a payment to the school, right? But is that really supposed to be a voice, or if that's really supposed to be what you call a down payment? And a lot of students might say that it's really supposed to be considered that that's a down payment. And I know a lot of times it seems like to me though that another thing that I want to talk about, toward it between right and wrong, but a lot of times people may say that, how do you handle it whenever you're wrong, whenever you come up with the roundings around to the nearest tenths and doing the actual math, and a 102 well, really, that if you actually done the calculations right here, talk about for the tuition cost right here, and if you were to go from 400 to 599 right here, and 400, and it means to 400,000 right here, and you're likely thinking as toward it that how come maybe you don't see that on the bill to where it goes to the 599 to 95, and so it sure seems that way. That do you see a penny more based on the fact about that you would maybe see something like that on a bill, maybe if it's about the fact about if there was a coupon that was redeemed. So let's just say that if there was a coupon that applied. So let's just say I can go and put on here that if you redeem a coupon code. So let's just say on average though that with a coupon code, and I can put it so that way we can see that right there. Talk about for that redeem a coupon code and maybe a voucher, and so it sure seems that way that when we speak about tuition though, that you want to know too that what exactly does that mean when we speak about tuition? Is that supposed to be a voice, or that's really supposed to be about the fact about that it's like a membership? And I guess most of the time, like a lot of universities would say, is to where that's another way of saying to where it's a membership, and so there's a fee to where that knowing about with most universities would say is to where that whenever you do pay on top of your membership, that's just to kind of get that's a fee just to be able to get your enrollment and everything all set and situated, and whenever you do start taking classes, and also if there's any awards or maybe earnings from the term, from your first term of the enrollment of the semester and all that. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that when we talk about tuition costs though, it sure seems that way that are you basically are saying is that tuition though that with the tuition that it goes by saying is to where if that's the same thing as a pay it forward, or if that's just another way of saying is to where that really that well you might get, but the way I think about it too though, that compared to like mortgage payments, and I know a lot of everybody else would say too that if you were to spend constantly spending hours just trying to figure out the math right here, just knowing about with the sales price right here, and then knowing about that whenever you first start working doing the digits here, and a 102 that why is it that 1 minute that you're told $8.90, and then 1 minute that for $12.05 an hour, but then that could maybe change to maybe $8 or something like that, or maybe $2.99. But let's just say that if we're talking about maybe if it is a tuition payment, maybe if it is that if it's something like mortgage payments, and for sure that it's if we were talking about mortgage payments though, then maybe if we were talking about maybe something like $1,888,888 or something like that, for mortgage payments, or for tuitions. But let's just say on average, though, that if we're talking about that, if it's according to maybe what some states would measure that by is to where that if it's every 5 years, every 5 or 10 years, that's calculated that they're able to come up with, the system is rounding up to the nearest tenth or to the nearest 20th measurement, to where that whenever we do the calculations right here, and just want to know too that when we speak about tuition cost, that you're basically are paying your half, just to be able to your membership on top of the books and supplies. And so it sure seems that way, that every time you think about tuition costs, though, it seems like that really that if you have it to where you go to your school, you pick the school and you pick the degree program and study, right? But you would maybe think that why is it that there will be requirements? So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that if you could pick the cost, if you could pick the price for which you agreed to pay based on your payment plan, and like everybody else may even say too that do you think that you would pick $2.99, and let's just say that maybe if that's every week or so. So let's just say that So how many of us will maybe say that really if the school would do that, to where that your college would say that your payments would be at $9.98 every week. I'm like, So let's just say that on average, though, that if it's based on maybe a personal loan or something like that, but let's just say on average, though, that there will be what you call certain amounts to where you go ahead and pay. You agree to pay $9.98 weekly, but then still take classes. And so it sure seems that way, that if that's really a choice of the matter, or if anything they say is to where we really only collect payments from you monthly. But let's just say, though, that if it's weekly, though, that you won't have a higher payment, to where your payment would only be on average between $2.99 to maybe $9.98. And so it sure seems that way, that when we think about this, so that are you still charge interest, and also that top up for can be done with allowance and offerings right here. But it sure seems that way, that we probably learned a lot of that stuff whenever we were calculating, especially if you're going to have any sort of checking account, really, or having a credit card, right? But if we're talking about for tuition payments right here, that it sure seems that way, that talk about for March 10th of 2023 right here. But you want to know too that whenever it comes to studying about the math configurations and everything, and you're wondering to where that you look at those bills a lot of times, right? You look at those bills a lot of times, and it sure seems that way, that you pay for what the bill says. And but let's just say on average, though, if you had a choice to where if you paid one of those amounts, but let's just say that a lot of companies would say that you would be able to pick, you would be able to pay that amount for what you agree to pay upon work on the math, right? So let's just say that if you were to send in the documents about for how you were able to calculate for how much those amounts based on from your current payment plan, payment arrangements a lot of times. So a lot of times it seems like that most of the time, though, do you think that a lot of companies would allow it where you go ahead and pay that price on top, from what you pick to agree to pay? So let's just say that if the payment plans were, I'm like, I can go ahead and put on here. You get rid of that comma and you put on here for $19.99 right there. So let's just say you got these different payment plans right here on top of I'll go ahead and change this right here to about 30%. So let's just say that doing the calculations right there, And you want to know too that really that do companies really like anybody say that, well, what does that usually mean whenever something like that? But still that but at the time you want to know too that, well, really that if we're talking about doing it, the calculations right here, and want to know too that tuition cost that a tuition is pretty much is to where that it's like it's a fee based on your enrollment status, right? Internships and scholarships, offerings. But on the other hand, too, that you want to know too that if you were to go ahead and vote to where that you want to ask, you want to put in a request to where that you agree to pay 200. On top of the interest. So let's just say that on average though that if you get a bill based on your request though, and a lot of times, do you think that that can be done if you are willing to explain your math configurings, to the office? So a lot of times it seems like that really that is that really about the fact about that you take a vote for that to where that okay. The original agreement said to where that this is how much the tuition cost would it cost, and if we're talking about 1900, but still, so if we're talking like I can go ahead and put the amount right here to where it the amount right, that the correct amount for that would be it will be 1900. So put on here for one, put that right there. To talk about for tuition costs right here. So if I were to change that right there, doing the calculations right here, and so you're 102 that where does the 896 come from? So let's just say that if we're actually doing the math right here, and at 102 that these, I can go ahead and put on here like a dash or something like that, but I don't know. That don't really make any sense either. But I'm just saying that if we're talking about tuition cost here, that you want to know too that this is the amount of a tuition, right? And so let's just say that put that on a separate line, if anything. Yeah, put that all on a separate line, if anything. But so it sure seems that way that you're doing it, trying to do the math right here, and just go ahead and put 0 right there for tuition. But let's just say that this right here is the calculations based on the percentage, and so let's just say what does that usually mean? And so a lot of times that whenever I was doing the math, a lot of times. Back in high school, though, that if you were to actually be rounding the nearest, you're rounding these digits together, a lot of times it seems like that you were getting bigger numbers on top of smaller numbers. So it seems like to me that makes it more confusing, right? And so it sure seems that way that make it a little bit less confusing right here. And at the time, it seems like that you really would get a lot of these numbers whenever you were trying to do the configurations on maybe on a calculator to where that you would go ahead and set a payment plan to where you're trying to figure out what your tuition payments are. So let's just say the original cost to that bill would have been $1,978, right? And let's just say that on average, though, that you agreed to pay, you agreed to pay you the 8%, or I'm like, So let's just say if you made a smaller payment. So a lot of times it's like, that going by the tuition cost right here, if it was on average, it was about, it was $1,978 was the total tuition amount. But then earlier that you meant like, like everybody else would say that, when do you think that the payment would only be $890? And on average, though, and let's just say if we're talking about that if you were to be using your discount card for any reason, like anybody say that if you were to be setting a payment plan, when do you think that that your bill would only be $890? And let's just say that maybe if there was any transfer credits applied, or if anything, that maybe if it was, or the fact that there were, financial aid grants available. And so the only way that maybe that would be able to happen is as to where if there was any grants that applied and maybe if you gotten financial assistance, right? So let's just say on average though that the package allowed toward that you will be making payments or that so like and so a lot of these readings right here were based on the fact about the shopping experience. But let's just say that if we're talking about for the tuition cost would be another way of how do you want to call it for the shopping experience. And everybody else might say that well you ought to think about that, whenever you're talking about making mortgage payments, that it's making mortgage payments that you would not see no amounts for just $8.90 on the bill. What you would actually see would be between $400 to $500 or so dollars or something like that, for mortgage. And but the way I think about though that looking at all these digits right here for 150.89, and for sure that on average though that this is probably that would probably be about the amount of tuition cost that you will be paying on top of for the compared to the full amount right there. So let's just say that like everybody would say that you go ahead and agree to pay 150.89 for the total tuition cost. And so it sure seems that way that if I say that well really if you actually done the math configuration, is that really the choice as to where you go ahead and pick that cost for what you agreed to pay for the tuition on top of the fact about for during the time that you were going and during the time that whenever you were taking classes during the time. And so it sure seems that way that when we speak about tuition costs though that are we necessarily thinking about any source of a savings or like this. So when we speak about tuition, a lot of times that's another way of saying is to where that's your activity. And what your activity that goes by saying that okay you agree to pay the 10% or based on the fact about that how much paying your half on top of how much financial assistance that you're able to to get, able to receive, working out with the school and all that. So like all students might even want to know too that for sure that there's going to be requirements based on if you have recently if you've taken out a loan or if anything, if there's any grants and any internships that apply. And so a lot of times you want to know too that when we speak about tuition costs though, and that you want to know too that well that's not what the bill said. What the bill said was is that you bought this package, the package and a certain the details about that that whenever you did sign up for classes and then whenever you do whenever you do get a bill, it seems like that those are two different things right here. Whenever you're taking down notes, it seems like those are two different things, right? So that's why it sure seems that way. That well, if you're told differently, from the bill, what the bill said, and maybe from what you were configuring, from whenever you're taking down notes and whenever you were actually setting the payment, arrangement on it. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That well, really that if you're going to be writing a bill, if you're going to be writing down a document based on math configurations, and for sure that that's your voice, right? That's your voice, just stating to word, okay, that this is what that you came up with right here. But whenever you do get a bill, it sure seems that way it's going to be different. So that's why it seems like everybody else would say too that what they're really looking for is that you go ahead and pay that total full amount. You pay this amount off in full right here, and then we'll go ahead and work out the rest of the payment arrangement. So a lot of times it seems like to where like most of these insurance companies would say too that you go ahead and pay that full amount right there. You pay that full amount right there, and then by the following month, and then you're more likely that that's whenever that those amounts are going to be reduced. So a lot of times it seems like that a lot of times that whenever you do see a bill, and it could be maybe if it's taxes, like maybe if it's if there's anything in regards to maybe car payments, I'm like, yeah. So a lot of times when we're talking about bills, and maybe if we're talking about credit card payments, a lot of times it seems like to where that number one, that if you are not receiving any, I'm like, if you if you're not a member to an insurance plan or anything, or maybe if for anything such as redeeming coupons or something like that. What I mean by redeeming coupons, and I think I explained it before what that means. But if everybody really wants me to say something, mention that again, is toward it. Yeah, whenever discounts apply. So, in case of anybody that doesn't know what I mean by that, about redeeming, that whenever you receive any digital coupon, any coupon codes, that you can actually see, you can receive those by email, or you can also receive them by text messages too. That those are codes that you receive, but then they're not applied according to the billing statement, that they're not applied, just yet. So a lot of times it seems like that when we check out our bills, a lot of times that we need to make sure, just know as to where that what applies to you, and for what is takes an effect according to what the billing statement shows. So each time we think about that, though, that talking about, with most of the time with most bills, that whenever you do get a bill, it seems like a lot of times it's a different story. Whenever you do check the bill and then find out, it's going to tell you something totally different from what you were told from earlier, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That yeah, well, really. Number one, though, it's like whenever you pay the full amount, for what shows on the bill, and then more likely it's going to show something different on the following month's bill. But it's like, yeah, so if we're talking about for tuition, though, that the bill did say for $1,978, but then with the 00 right here. So it sure seems that way. That what does that mean right there when we speak about for 00? The only time that maybe it would be 00, and like everybody else say too, that really that like everybody else would say too, that why can't you just change the bill to 99? And a lot of times it's like, yeah, if that's really the marketing price, or if anything that's before that discount applied, and for like so far as with your enrollment. So let's just say that if you were able to register, I'm like, yeah, if you were able to get enrolled within a certain period of time of that academic year, right, of the term of the semester, and let's just say that that the original cost would have been for $1,978.99, but then that was before that savings. That was before that voucher even applied, and that was before that coupon code even applied. So let's just say on average, though, that if you were to explain to somebody about a voucher, and do we all know? Yeah, well, do we all know what a voucher is? And I can explain it down here too. If we all know what a voucher is, right? I'm sure most of us probably do know what a voucher is, but I can go ahead and tell anybody who may not know what that means. It's another way of saying it. It's like a information. Information provided to for those who those who personnel who qualified for financial assistance, qualified for for low income for low income individuals, for low income. for low income individuals, and so it's basically vouchers are a source of it's like a coupon, but the word I'm looking for is more like a toward that maybe like a stipend, but still it's another way of saying this toward it. It's a it's a I'll go and just say a form indicating for assistance. So that's basically what it means, for a voucher. So in case of anybody that may want to know too, that whenever it comes to tuition cost, and maybe whenever it does come to any other sorts of financial assistance, especially for low-income individuals, and I know, that a lot of everybody else might even say too that a lot of information like that would also apply to those who are receiving Medicare, that Medicare and Medicaid, that there will be what you call things for that you'll be qualified for, but on the other hand, it sure seems that way that when we're doing the math counting here, and want to know too that as toward that well, really can math really be explained in a lot of variety of ways, even though that the money has not always been, even though if it hasn't been received yet, or if anything, whenever you first start working on this, that you were actually learn your multiplication tables. And most of the time, that's usually my case, is that whenever I'm working this, and usually it's like, that you were learning, you were learning your multiplication tables, and you were learning how to multiply 5 times 3 and 5 times 5 and all that, and so it's like, you round it up to until you reach up to 10. And now it's like you're just trying to figure out, okay, vouchers, whenever you say vouchers, what do you mean by that? Whenever you do say, rounding to the nearest tens or something like that, or calculation by the full percentage or something like that, what does that mean? So it sure seems that way that whenever you first start learning something, though, it's like, you want to know too that you don't really know what all this means right here, but like everybody else would say too that you've seen that before, where it says pay in full amounts right here. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that if you agree to pay this amount in full, then your next billing statement is going to show something different. Your next billing statement is going to maybe allow it to where it's going to say that you've been credited, to where that the bill is not going to be as much as it was, the last time, or if anything, whenever this savings account applies, to the bill. So a lot of times it's like, well, really, that whenever you first start working on this, it's possible that you may have learned from a candy bar, you may have learned maybe by maybe purchasing gas, or maybe doing online shopping or something like that, but on the other hand, too, that when we speak about tuition costs a lot of times, that it seems like the word that we don't need to get that confused compared to an allowance. An allowance is that's paid to you based on the hard work that you put for something, but compared to tuition, a tuition that's amount that you're sending to the school based on the facts about your interest in and attending. The enrollment program. So that's the amount. That's money that you pay up front. Just based on that. For what you for what you were one to participate in, and what you're studying. So it sure seems that way that when we speak about tuition, a lot of times that you want to know too that you may originally been told that college should always be about what you want to study and what you want to learn about, right? And so it sure seems that way, that every time you look at those college papers, you're probably thinking too that, I think the tuition should always be about me, what I want to study, what I have an interest in, instead of setting all these rules and regulations about, what I gotta do, and setting the deadlines to where, okay, this is due, and then you gotta do this and you gotta do that. So a lot of other students might even say too that why is it that you're always having to follow these rules and these regulations whenever it comes to working that out, to where that if you want to go ahead and go further with your education, that why is it that you cannot just pick. I'm like, yeah, like everybody else would say too, that why is it that you don't have that ability to where you can go ahead and set a plan. So a lot of times it seems like that a lot of students would maybe say that you would want to go ahead and vote in favor to where that you could go ahead and set the tuition payment to where that you go ahead and pay that amount right there in full, or if anything, make a small payment right there, and like I say, make a weekly payment. So like everybody else might say that if you do qualify for financial aid, then you would maybe see that on there to where, yeah, especially if you're employed, and most of the time that's going to maybe be applied to where, like, yeah, if you are a member through a certain program, or maybe if it's anything in regards to your insurance or something like that. But I just really I really see it. I actually see that more toward that if you are if there's any transfer credits, especially. So it sure seems that way that when we speak about the tuition, though, that it seems like to me that yeah, it seems, like. But the way I think about it, though, that yeah, when we speak about tuition, though, that you're wondering to where that, yeah, well, really, a lot of students are looking forward to where graduating. You're looking forward to graduation. You're looking forward to being able to get a good paying job, at some point. And speaking about good paying jobs, though, and half the time you want to know too that if the situation is not going to be about tuition payments, and maybe it's going to maybe be about is to where you're going to be setting a goal to where that this is going to be your starting salary right here. So let's just say if you are hired for a job, and let's just say that if there's a number of members of the company that are willing to pay, they are willing to hire you, and let's just say that, yeah, I'll go and put on here that yeah, if you are hired for a job, and let's just say that they didn't say, I'm like, yeah, that the job advertisement, did not say $8.70 an hour, or maybe $10 an hour, but let's just say on average, though, that this job is willing to set the hiring salary to $17 an hour right here. Hired for $17 an hour. So let's just say on average, though, that for any source of hiring points, though, jobs, job openings, though, if it's not going to be a tuition payment, it's maybe going to be about a job opening. So let's just say that on average, though, that if somebody were to ask you to where that I would really like to know is to where if you go ahead and set this to where that that person right there is to where do you really have a choice to where that you want to go ahead and set the bars right here to where that $15 an hour, $15 an hour, or do you want to set the bar again to where that that we'll go ahead and we want to hire this person for $9.70 an hour plus the time, or maybe $9.80 an hour plus time and a half. And what do I mean by time and a half and time? Time. Time. I'm like, yeah. I guess. How would you say that on a calculator? And I would maybe say that something like that. I'm like, I don't think that's how you. I don't think that's how you would configure that on an actual calculator. But let's just say that if we're setting the wages right here, and I'm like, really, at the time, I really don't even know what I'm really talking about. It just came to my mind. A lot of times it seems like if I'm just writing them down just to get some ideas. But on your hand, it seems like that talk about with these configurations right here, that if we're talking about 980 and maybe $15 an hour, maybe, yeah, you got that on there twice, don't you? I'm like, well, really? 780, I think, yeah. The minimum wage now is $10 an hour. So if there's any companies, yeah, go ahead and change that to 14. So it sure seems that way. That it does. Do you really have a choice toward it? How much that you're willing to pay this person per hour based on their work experience and based on their resume, and a lot of times you want to know too that really, if you really have a choice toward it, how much do you request to be paid per hour? And so it sure seems that way. That when we think about that, though, in 102, that if you had a choice toward that, if you were to take a guess or for any reason at all, that if your work is needed, and a lot of times it seems like that's really about the fact about that whenever your work is needed, based on your qualifications and based on your resume, that you put on the application to where that I request to be paid 14.80 an hour, but then let's just say that you or say that, okay, I'll be reasonable, okay, I'll go ahead and just say that I'll go ahead and take, if I really want to, yeah, you put in a job application, and let's just say that if you want to go ahead and say that I'll agree to accept 9.80 an hour, and then yeah, for full time and part time or for full time work. So that's usually you usually see that on the top right here. So I can put that on the top. Yeah, I'm just kind of generating ideas really for full time and full time does that might not full time. So let's just say that on average though that let's just say that if people say, yeah, up to 20 hours to 20 hours a week. So if we were to actually do the math right here in 102, for up to 20 hours a week. So it sure seems that way that if that's a requirement or if that's really your choice for what you would like to do. And so it's like, that you would actually see that on an actual application, right? You would not actually see that toward about the fact about if you were taking notes about this. But let's just say on average, though, that if we were to actually be talking about tuition payments right here, and 102, that really that you actually do the math configuring, but then whenever you actually fill out that application to anything that you're applying for, and you 102 really that you're not really I'm like, do you think that maybe an application would be based on your choice of the matter about your voice, or would it really be about the fact about, oh, okay, on the application it's asking you to take an assessment, or if anything it's asking you to go into section 5 or something like that. It's actually asking you to fill in this information, or do selections, to where you actually you actually on the application it's actually giving you a list provided. That list provided is going to give you a selections of answers, so you're not able to type them in manually. And so it sure seems that way that every time we think about that, about whenever it comes to maybe making our selections or something like that, about the price and doing the favors. And but on the other hand, that whenever we talk about the tuition cost right here, that it seems like that if that's really supposed to be your voice about what you agree to pay, or for any reason at all, that's really about the enrollment. I'm like, that's the cost for what I'm like, everybody else might say that that it's the rule. Really, it's really the rule. But on the other hand, that another way of how you want to look at it is to where down payment. But if you want to look at that to where that when we're speaking about school a lot of times, when we speak about school though, that we all can think about that to where that when we do start working on something a lot of times, that you want to know too that the pay in favor would also be advised as toward that those tuition costs though, that if you want to set a payment plan to where it's weekly, or if anything paid in full, if it's certain amount. But so yeah that so the way we think about that though is as toward that the paid amount to where that could you also look at that like insurance, to where if you're willing to pay the amount for what I'm like like a deductible. And so do you want to look at that? Did you want to look at a tuition payment as the same as something like a deductible? But I guess in a lot of ways it's like really you would really only want to use it as an example, only maybe if you're talking about maybe the cost of the damages. Maybe if it's a property damage or something like that. You would really not want to get that confused compared to a tuition payment. Tuition payment is used, based on your enrollment status and based on about your activity, based on from whenever you were taking classes, right? And then compared to your typical insurance companies. And so that's why it sure seems that way that when we're thinking about this, we don't need to get those confused either. So it sure seems that way that when we're talking about even if we're talking about mortgage payments here, that you want to know too that you look at a bill and then you see these higher and lower amounts right here, and thinking too that okay, that 1 minute that you're told 890, and 1 minute that you're told these different your prices here, and 102 for 150, and then for 150.89. So really, are you really doing any favors for anybody else whenever it comes to so like everybody else would say too, that you can maybe even mention on a satisfaction survey about what you're thinking, but still, on average though, that if you can maybe explain to somebody what you gotta do, and most of the time that's usually the case, as to where what do you need to do? But a lot of times it's like, well, really, when we speak about tuition costs, though, that's usually meaning as to where really, that's the amount that the school is asking you to pay on top of just to be able to get you enrolled, and just to be able to get you signed up for classes, and to be able to use their services and everything. So it sure seems that way that you want to know too that there's going to be requirements and everything, but still, on average though, that whenever I did the studies about that back whenever I was in the 5th grade, it seems like a lot of things that maybe I didn't quite understand at the time, and one of those things is maybe going to be advised is that of course, you're not always going to get your free candy bar like you expected, but on the other hand, that it seems like to where that it's just kind of get you an idea about there's a difference between what your choice is, and of course about to where if you're willing to be if you're willing to negotiate and be cooperative whenever it comes to taking care of your bills and knowing about what the key responsibility is. And so it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to taking care of the paperwork a lot of times, and you'll want to know too when we talk about payment arrangements and everything, that it's like you more likely would have maybe been told that the original price to this, if you buy a car or a home, that the full price to this would have been just for the down payment would have been $1,978.99. but then you were able to work it out with the state to where that brought the price down by up to 30% just because of the fact that whenever you did apply for assistance and whenever you received extra benefits based on those grants. So it sure seems that way that you want to know too that okay, like I say, like anybody say that it can be very confusing, and especially that whenever you look at your tax documents a lot of times and want to know too that why is it that you're told 2 or 3 different price tags, and want to know too that that's before that opportunity credit was applied, and so it sure seems that way that when we're told about for 400,000 599 right there, and it's like that's the type of stuff that you didn't quite understand whenever we were learning our multiplication tables, and so it sure seems that way that you want to know too that if you were to could that possibly be done on a multiplication table? And I guess anybody say that, well, really, it could probably be done, only just in a different way. But on the other hand, that it is really encouraged to where you go ahead and do the studies. So is toward well, really that if you're trying to do the calculations here using a multiplication table, if anything, use the line graph measure of 10. And so it's like, say, you may have done the studies, using the words of the fives, right? But let's just say if you were to use 10, and it's like, but still, the highest amount, but still, at the time you want to know too that well, really, if we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars here, then maybe that you would maybe say is to where you go ahead and use a multiplication table right here between 1 and maybe 15 to maybe 20. So it's like, it all really depends on the fact about that from where the readings are, and so it sure seems that way that it goes from the hundreds to even to the thousands, and so it sure seems that way that each time we think about tuitions and when we think about multiplication tables right here, and a lot of times you want to know too that you see this on a tax rate right here. So let's just say that's right there, like and you want to know too that the tax rate right here, right here for like it would be for 0 to 5 tax. So if I really don't even know if I'm like that's not really even that's not correct, but still talking about 89 right for 986%. So if we were to use something like that, but then we put a point right there, for 0.986, right? So a lot of times, to me though, that really applies toward it, for service about your tax rates, and also interest that applies, and so you would usually see those math configurations like something like that, mainly over the fact about it that if there's interest that does apply, and then also that just about how the calculations apply toward it. If there's based on based on interest, and then also that if there's any fees applied after that charge. So a lot of times it's like so if you were actually trying to do the math right there, and I want to know too that you cannot keep track of all that right there. It's really hard to keep track of, and I tell you one thing, everybody, that if you had any receipts, you want to know too that well, really, you pretty much would have to hang on a receipt based on your vote. A lot of times it seems like that there's a difference between what the receipt says after that you got the bill and or anything, and compared to what you configured. And a lot of times it seems like to me though that yeah, you want to go ahead and hang on to the receipts based on that from your studying time compared to whenever you actually get the bill and know about what it's going to say. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that when we talk about tuition payments, a lot of times that you want to know too that a lot of stuff that you didn't quite understand back whenever you were much younger. And it's like, yeah, what does that mean right there for 999-033 to 990 or something like that? What does that all that mean? Well, really, it pretty much means is to where that if you don't know what it is, well, now you know now. And if you don't know now, well, then you can go ahead and do the studying, right? So that's what it is, and then that you now for what you know now. But anyway, but the way I think about it too, though, that whenever it comes to understanding about math, though, and tuitions, and at the time you want to know too, that do you really pick the price? I'm like, so it sure seems that way. The choice, that talk about for money vote right here, to where that can you really pick the price for which you agree to pay? And a lot of times everybody else might say that to where that whenever you do get a bill, most of the time you pay what the bill says, right? And a lot of times it's like, really, if you could maybe pick the price for which you agree to pay, do you think that on average, though, that you would maybe have to be a member, or maybe if anything, that it would need to be is toward the up? That request can only be allowed only if you place it within a certain period of time, a year or so. Like everybody else would say too, that most of the time, you know how that is. Whenever you do get a bill, you pay for what it says, right? But everybody else might even say that on average, though, that really, that if you could pick a price, if you could pick what's fair, and for sure that you would, for sure you would just pay the $8.90 right there. Like everybody else would say too, that do you think that you would pay? Do you think that you would pick that price right there? And you want to know too, that do you think that you would pick that? You would pick $8.90 right there. That's the price I agree to pay, just because. For what reason? Just because it looks very appealing, or just because. And I'm like, at the time you want to know too. You want to go ahead and make that bigger right there, so that way we can all see that right there. Anybody say that, yeah, well, if you want to make it bigger, right? Go ahead and make that bigger if you can. I can, well, really, don't we see the big picture right here? Yeah, that right there, $8.90 right there. That right there looks like a co-payment right there. Yeah, I'm trying to make it bigger here, but anybody say you can go and just retype that right there and make it bigger. Yeah, go ahead and make that bigger. Go ahead and, oh, I'm trying to, everybody. I'm trying to make it bigger so that way we can all see that right there. But there. Make that bigger right there. So let's just say that on average, though, that if we all agreed to pay just $8.90, just for a tuition payment or for anything, and you want to know too that do you think that you would that you would agree to pay $8.90 for anything? And let's just say if that is for a co-payment. And want to know too how many of us would maybe vote, nay or yay or something. I'm like, so a lot of times it seems like that if that's really a choice of the matter, and half the time everybody else would say to you that really that's not too much to ask for, really, to be quite honest. You by say that if your tuition payment was only $8.90, then you know for sure that by say I don't have no problem paying that amount compared to other amounts that I've seen, but still, on average though, that whenever it comes to understanding about money vote, huh? But anyway, Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.